Hey everybody. Okay, so I want to talk about how to use a variety of selection tools in Photoshop, when to use them appropriately and when it might not matter and when it does and what would be the best for a given situation. So I want to show you guys a few different times where certain tools in Photoshop may be a better choice. Of course, like anything in Photoshop, there's a million ways to do something, so if you find a better way, certainly do that. There's usually no right or wrong way in Photoshop when it comes to achieving a particular result, so feel free to experiment, Google, look at other solutions, but here are a few for you. So I have a few images to show you guys. One is this turkey house, and I want to make a selection, but I don't really care. I want to use it kind of like I would scissors potentially, and make straight cuts. And one thing that will allow you to do that is the marquee tool. So if I want a square, you can of course click and hold on any of these things in the toolbox that have, or sorry, the toolbar that have a arrow here, and it'll give you a variety of selectors. So we can use the rectangular marquee tool and we can select that, and anything in this box is selected. So if we were to delete it, we'll click OK, it would delete it. If we wanted to delete everything but that box, you could go up to select and click inverse or hold Shift Command I, and you can see now there's marching ants around the whole thing. And if we clicked, okay, that's where we would be. We'll use the history palette and we'll go back. If you wanted to get rid of everything and resize the image to that, of course you could use crop, or you could go to image crop and it will make it the size that you selected. Let's say you want to make a non-geometric selection, or rather one that doesn't fit into a predefined pattern. You can use the polygonal lasso tool, and I can, if you click anywhere outside of the image area, of course it will only select what where the image is itself, so I'll click there, and you can see wherever I click is going to be in the image area. If you hold down Shift, it'll only let you make 90s and 45s. This is me holding down the Shift key. I'm going to click here, click up here, click down here, and you go back to the point where you started, the origin point, and it will complete the selection. Now if I want to copy that, I can. If I want to, I can go File, Copy. If I want to cut it out, I can, and then if I paste it in, it will paste into a new layer. We now have that. You can rotate it, you can transform it. It's now its own selection. So you can certainly use that. The polygonal lasso tool behaves, like I said, most like scissors. That's a good way to do things, particularly if you're not concerned about certain areas, particular areas getting cropped. You can also make selections with the magnetic lasso tool. It behaves similarly to the lasso tool. The lasso tool itself goes where you draw, so this is like using an X-Acto of sorts. If I go back, it'll make that selection. So if I want to draw around this light, I could. There it is. It's not very precise. We'll get into how to make precise curved selections in a minute. It involves the pen tool. But you can also use a variant of the lasso tool, the magnetic lasso tool, and it looks for contrast in pixels. So I can click and drag it around, say this turkey's head. I can click if I want a sharp point. Then you can see it follows roughly where the turkey is. Now if we zoom in, you can see it's close. Super unprecise though, more so than the maybe drawing it, but still not great. An instance where that would be good might be something like this, where there's quite a bit of disparity between the mountains and the sky. It's not going to matter as much if the mountains are a little jagged or they don't follow, say, the absolute path. So we would click. You can see it's kind of helping me fill in the blanks. I'm helping it a little by laying down some very specific points. You can see it wants to get close. We'll just close this really quickly so we can examine it. You can see it's not super close, but it's also not that bad. And depending on what we're needing it for, that would definitely suffice. So you could also use that on here. You can click and you can follow it pretty fast, and it will, for the most part, because there is so much contrast, somebody's already gone to the trouble of isolating this, it will lay it down. But where the weak link is, in these little corners, it leaves just a tiny bit of white. Depending on the background you're hoping to put this on, that may be more or less of a big deal. And there might be a better solution, and that is the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool works by point samples and tolerances. So if we click into an area, it will select everything that is that color or close to it, depending on. See, you can achieve the highlights. So if we use the Magic Wand tool, right now the tolerance is set at 32. It'll select that same grouping. If we change the tolerance to 64 and click in that area, it'll select areas that are within a tolerance of 64 pixels one way or the other in terms of contrast and shading and all of that. So depending on what you're after, if you want everything that is white, that is touching, that might be a good way to do it. You can see if we go back to 32 and select the white area, it has selected everything that's white that's touching. And for the most part, it did a really good job. You can see in this area, got really close, closer than, say, the magnetic lasso tool. Now where it fails is over here, because this is close enough to our value that it has included it in the selection. Now you can deal with that a couple of ways. One way is to use a combination of these tools. You can go to the polygon lasso tool. You can see if I hold down Shift, it will add a plus. If you hold down the Option or Alt key, if you're on a PC, it'll have a minus. So we are adding or subtracting from the selection. So if I want to subtract this area and manually draw it in, I can click an area and you can see it goes away. If for some reason I wanted to add a selection, I could hold down the Shift key. Don't know why I would want to do this, but we've just added that to the selection. The other thing we could do is attempt to fine tune it through the tolerance. We could say 16, and we could click on here. You can see it selected less of that. You could go down to 4. Now we're getting much closer. So you can vary that tolerance to a degree, more or less, to get different results that may be better. You can see though that there are certain areas of the image, because the tolerance is so low, that were excluded, that had been included So you have to find the happy medium. Sometimes it's easier to have a lower tolerance and then simply use the marquee selection tool, hold down the shift key, and add those to the selection manually. You can see this might be a better solution than trying to go around the edges of the turkey with a higher tolerance and including them. It might be easier to include some of these white areas that got excluded. Finally, one more thing that I'll show you before we wrap this up is that you can use the pen tool. The pen tool is the same pen tool. It behaves in exactly the same way as it does in Illustrator. So if you need exact and precise control, this might be the best way to do it. So you would click here, I'm going to click and hold. You can make your general selection. You can see the paths following this. We will close this quickly. This is a path that behaves, again, just like paths in Illustrator. You can actually export these paths to Illustrator, which can be very handy if you're trying to trace a silhouette of a turkey. I don't know why you would be, but you could do it in Photoshop and export the paths into Illustrator and then use them just like any vector drawing. You can also, you can see over here in the paths palette, here's our work path. You can double click on it and name it Turkey Outline 1. And then you can go back to your pen tool, make another one. You can add it. You can click, that will add it to, you can see there's two paths here now. You can make a new path layer by going down here and creating new path, making a polygon. Now if we have these paths that'll give us a precise layer of control. What we can do, you can see down here there's some options. If you hover over these, you can load that path as a selection. So if I click that, those become regular selections that behave in the same way, so we can copy them and paste them, for instance. Here they are. You can really treat them in the same way as if you would use the marquee tool or the lasso tool or the magic wand tool. We'll get into how to modify selections in a bit, but for now this should give you an idea of the tools you have to make the selection.